Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Dan Labbe and Mary Kay Cabot with you. We're doing a Hey, Mary Kay edition of the podcast today. Todd Monken will be introduced on Tuesday at noon. So we'll be back on Tuesday with a reaction to that. But we're recording this. It's about almost 4 o'clock here on Monday. So trying to get a little bit back on schedule here with the pod as the combine comes up, as the coaching search it never really winds down, but it has sort of wound down a little bit, Mary Kay. At least there is a head coach in place, and we're hearing some coordinator names, and that's where we're going to start with one coordinator in particular. We had a lot of questions about this man, Jim Schwartz, and we're going to start with someone who I don't think we've used a question from this person before. So Jim Jensen from North Canton. Hey, Mary Kay, since the Browns hold all the cards with Jim Schwartz, do you think they'll just up his pay and give him an extension more in line with Todd Monken's contract length?
Well, I absolutely do think that they will sit down with Jim, if they haven't done so already, and offered him some kind of a raise, some kind of an extension. And I think it's then going to be up to him to decide what he wants to do. But the way that it's been put to me and the way that I've been writing it is the fact that he's under contract with them and they really don't have any plans of letting him out of that contract and letting him go coach somewhere else. It's very similar to what happened last year with Myles Garrett. There was no way they were trading Myles Garrett. He was their premier defensive player and they were going to keep him on the team and he was going to come back and he was going to play football for the Cleveland Browns. That's how they feel about Jim Schwartz. He's their premier defensive coordinator. They want him coaching their defense to great heights again. And they have no intentions of letting him out of the contract. He's got 2 years left. I do see a world in which they would extend that. Not sure if they would go all the way out to Todd Monken's 5 years, but I could definitely see them extending him and sweetening the pot and trying to get him to come back here and put this whole situation behind him.
So with this situation, and the Myles Garrett part of it is interesting, that they're sort of kind of playing that same game here with Jim under contract. I guess I'm going to zag on this a little bit. I don't know if this is the right plan for them, if they really want this to be successful. And that's not a shot at Jim, because Jim's obviously a really good coordinator, and he's done great things with this defense. But, what's the old Mike Tomlinism? We want volunteers, not hostages, right? And I just feel like I've seen this movie before with the Cleveland Browns, and to me, it's like an organizational thing. Like, I just don't trust that they can handle a situation like this where, I don't know, let's say, because you're going to be playing a lot of young guys. We don't know who's going to be a quarterback, but let's say for whatever reason, they're like 3-6 after 9 games and the defense is playing really well and the offense maybe has had some growing pains, and it's not really a reflection on Todd Monken or anything, but let's say they just haven't won a bunch of games. How do you manage that? If you've got to deal with Jim Schwartz, who thinks he should be the head coach, who once again, maybe his defense is playing really well, and once again, maybe the offense isn't doing what they needed to do just yet, because that could happen again, because we don't know the quarterback. They're going to be playing a lot of young guys over there. I think you're playing with fire if you hold Jim Schwartz hostage and bring him back. Now, it could be great. Maybe they win games. Maybe they make a playoff push and everybody sings Kumbaya. I don't know. I just don't trust this organization to handle a situation like this well if things go sideways at the start of the year.
Well, I do hear what you're saying, but sometimes money helps to smooth over some hurt feelings and some ruffled feathers. We saw that happened with Myles Garrett when they gave him $40 million a year. That kind of took care of some of his feelings about not wanting to be here. They made him at the time the highest paid defensive or highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL. And sometimes, just sometimes, that can do the trick. So let's see if that works with Jim. If they sweeten the pot, he's got a family, he's got kids. Maybe he wants to do everything he can to set up the family and make sure that they're taken care of for their futures as well. So I think, there's something to be said for that. And then there are worse defenses that you could try to coach, right? You've got Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, Carson Schlesinger, Mason Graham, Grant Delpit, Tyson Campbell. It's a good defense, and he's going to look good coaching it. And guess what happens when you're one of the hottest coordinators in the NFL? Sometimes, just sometimes, you get another look for head coach that maybe you didn't think was coming. This year, he interviewed for the Browns job. Last year, he interviewed for, I mean, and for the Ravens job this year. So next year, if he has a really, really good year and the Browns win some football games, there is a world in which maybe someone will give him a look again. And that would be a way to get out of your contract, is to go get a head coach job. But you're not going to get that by sitting at home. So these are some of the reasons that, that I wrote a column the other day saying that he should come back here and pair with Todd Monken and see what those two guys can do together. And the other thing about this is the fact that they didn't pass him over because he wasn't qualified. They didn't pass him over because he wasn't good enough. It wasn't that. They needed an offensive coach to fix their offense. That's what they were going for. And Todd Monken presented the more robust offensive plan. That's what they needed. That's what they went for.
I do think it would be a little bit more of a concern if they had gone, this is something we talked about last week. Could you imagine a guy like Nate Shieldhouse having to try to put out this fire, or a guy like Grant Udinsky having to put out this fire? I think the fact that you did hire a veteran coach who has been through it before, who knows how to play the game, he's going to be 60 years old soon. Todd Monken, I think he'll be able to handle this, even if things do get a little awkward, and even if it does. Like I said, if you don't get out to a great start, and we're in a similar situation to where we were last year, where the defense was playing great and the offense maybe isn't holding it up its end of the bargain. But I can also see a situation where every Thursday, Jim is sitting there taking some shots, and then, Todd can be a little grumpy, like we talked about, and he can be a little prickly, and maybe Todd takes some shots back. And then we're sitting there in December like, man, this was actually a really bad idea to try to pair these guys and try and put Jim Schwartz in a situation that he didn't want to be in. I would hope that Jim, and I think we've seen this over the years, I think he was like this with Kevin too, that Jim can be professional enough that, like, even if he's thinking, man, I should have gotten this job and you guys are seeing why, he would just put on a happy face and get through what he has to get through next season. But that's the risk you run, is that maybe things turn sour if the season doesn't go as planned.
Right. And I agree. I think that that Jim Schwartz, if he is going to come back here, I think he's going to do exactly what Myles Garrett did when he came back. Myles came back and he said, I'm going to be the best I can possibly be for this team. He took up challenges from Jim Schwartz and Jimmy Haslam to become even more of a leader of this football team. And then he went out and he had arguably his best career season, set the NFL single season sack record with 23 sacks, and did all kinds of things to live up to the $40 million a year contract that they gave him. So I think that it would probably be a similar situation where if Jim decides he's coming back, and if Todd decides that he's comfortable with him coming back under all of these conditions, then he's going to be a professional. He's been around for so many years. He hangs his hat on being that professional and being that upstanding guy and being that leader. And what happened the other day when he got upset, that's just the emotions. That's the heat of the moment. That is passion for the game. You want somebody that's that passionate and that wanted this job that much. That's what you want here. So I think he would be professional, but I would take my cues from what Todd Monken did when he was here in 2019 as offensive coordinator under Freddie Kitchens. Things were falling apart all around him, and it was a mess. It was a fiasco. Every single thing about it was dysfunctional, and it was described to me as an S show back in the day. Just the whole thing, just a week of trying to put it together and calling it on game day. It was basically a joke. But Todd Monken, he knew what his role was. He knew that he was hired by Freddie Kitchens and that Freddie was the boss and that his job was to do what he was asked to do, which was to try to put the game plan together during the week, to put his head down, to work hard and try to basically, for the most part, keep his mouth shut about all that. And he did that. He did that to the best of his ability. And that is why he sat up there every Thursday and said that he was having his weekly dentist appointments because he couldn't say what he wanted to say. He had to toe the company line. He had to be a professional, and that's how he handled it. And that is how Jim would have to handle this situation if he's going to come back. Now, I just talked to somebody today that said, No way. There's no way he's coming back into that building. It's not going to happen. There's no way he's coming back. And maybe that's the truth. Maybe there's no way he will do that. But I don't see a path forward right now for him to coach again in 26 unless he's coaching for the Cleveland Browns. And do you really want to hang it up and not coach again and retire? I mean, is he ready for that yet? Or do you want to come back here and make the whatever raise you would get? I mean, he's got to be making 4.5, 4 or $5 million a year as it is right now. If he can parlay that into a nice raise, then come back and do that and win some games with Todd Monken and see what that can turn into for you.
Yeah, and it's sort of similar to the quarterback situation. I think Monken has to feel comfortable with it too, right? Like this has to be a Todd Monken decision. So even if the Browns, like even if Andrew and the Haslams are like, no, we're not gonna, we're making you stick with your contract. If Todd Monken comes to them and says, listen, I've talked to Jim Schwartz. Hopefully that conversation is going to happen or has happened. I've talked to Jim and this can't work. Like he would not want to be here. We'd basically, like I said, there we'd be holding him hostage, and it would just be something that we'd have to deal with at some point down the road that, again, with a very young football team, I don't want to have to deal with. Or he says, hey, you know what? I really like Jim. We've hashed some things out. Jim's going to be a good soldier, and we're going to go play. We're going to go try and win some football games. It's got to be up to Todd, I think. It can't be Andrew and Jimmy and Jay, all these guys. It can't be them saying, this is your defensive coordinator. It has to be Todd coming to them and saying, yes, I can make this work.
Right. Absolutely 100%. And that is why those two longtime grizzled veterans need to put their heads together and decide if they can make it work together. They do have to do that. Jim was not forced upon Todd Monken. He was not forced upon any other candidate. There was a strong suggestion that they wanted Jim Schwartz to stick around and be in the building, but nobody was forced to have to do that. In fact, if they had hired Jesse Minter, Jim Schwartz would have been gone. So this is a situation where, yes, these two guys have to be comfortable with each other. And from everything that I understand, Todd has always been comfortable with keeping Jim from the start. He's known him from afar. They've never worked together, but they've known each other from working against each other all these years. He knows what it's like to go up against a Jim Schwartz defense. He knows how effective that is, how good he is at his job, and he's always been open to keeping him. So we'll see how that goes once they have a conversation. We'll probably know more about that tomorrow when we talk to Todd Monken in Berea at noon. But another thing to remember here is that at this moment in time, while we are taping this on Monday, the rest of the defensive staff is still intact. It's still intact. Those guys are all still there. You still got Jacques coaching the defensive line. You still have Jason Tarver coaching the linebackers. You still have Brandon Lynch coaching the cornerbacks. You still have Ephraim Banda coaching the safeties. So you've got all of these guys still in place, still coaching. And if Jim decides that he's going to retire, I suppose there would be a world in which you could promote one of those guys as defensive coordinator. But as of right now, they're planning on keeping the same system, keeping the same personnel, and moving forward as best they can.
Yeah, it's always funny because I talked to an assistant coach a few years ago who actually was with the Browns. I think he worked for Rob Chudzinski, and Rob got fired. And this coach was like one of those sort of intern positions or whatever, really low on the totem pole at the time. And Rob gets fired and he's like, so do I go into work? Do I keep coming into work? He kind of just kept showing up to work because he was still under contract. He was still like, so I think people sometimes forget that like these assistants are still probably all showing up to Berea every day and kind of waiting. It's probably a very nerve wracking time, unless they've been given assurances at this point, but they're still showing up. They're still doing their jobs. And, obviously they can't, directly coach players right now, but they're there. They're they're holding things down in Berea right now.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see what happens if Jim steadfastly refuses to come back. Once again, if he does that, he's basically saying that he's done and he's retiring. But if he steadfastly refuses and you are keeping this staff intact, do you try to find someone else to come in here and manage this staff and basically say, hey, this is what you have to work with. You don't usually like to do that when you hire a coordinator. You want to let them build their staff out. So I don't know what they would do in that situation. Or the other option would be to promote one of the current guys on the staff. And I had heard that Ephraim Banda was someone who was going to be in line potentially for the defensive coordinator job. I guess that would have been in the event that Jim had gotten the head coach job. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But I would think that you'd have to have this conversation very soon because you're going to the combine soon. You've got to figure out who you're drafting. You want your coordinator to be a big part of that. And you have to decide if you have to hire another coordinator. And most of the best ones have already been snatched up.
Yeah, we did get a question about that, like what direction would the Browns go if Jim Schwartz left? And I mean, just recently, you look at the headlines. Raheem Morris is going to San Francisco. Anthony Weaver is going back to Baltimore. The Packers just hired Jonathan Gannon. So I don't know all the names that are out there still off the top of my head, but we're getting to that point. Like all these teams have coaches now. Everybody's got their coach in line at this point. So whether they've actually been able to hire him or not, these guys know where they're going. So now the coordinator race is on. So Todd and this Browns team is going to need an answer to this fast.
Yeah, I do think that they need an answer to this fast. And really, in a perfect world, you would have liked to have given Jim a nice cooling off period. But I don't know if you have time for a long cooling off period because this is a business. It's a pressure cooker and you've got to spin it forward. You've got to be moving ahead and figuring out what the next steps are. And ironically, two of his players on Thursday night are probably going to be honored as NFL Defensive Player of the Year and then NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year in Myles Garrett and Carson Schlesinger. Maybe he'll even be there for that situation for the NFL honors on Thursday night. But they need to know as soon as possible. Todd Monken has pretty much filled out his whole entire offensive staff for the most part, except for a few loose ends here and there. I mean, I think they still have to figure out if Deuce Staley is going to stick around or maybe if he's taking another opportunity. And they have to figure out if they're making Christian Jones the wide receivers coach, if he wants to stay here and do that. Because they're supposed to be hiring Jeff Blasco as the tight ends coach, or at least that has been in the works. So it's time. It's time to figure out what's happening with your defensive staff. And I don't think they have a whole bunch of time to let Jim simmer over this situation.
Okay, let's shift gears here and let's talk quarterbacks. So this comes from Tom in Middlebury, Connecticut. Hey, Mary Kay, how do you think Todd Monken will handle the win now versus develop a quarterback situation? Will he play Deshaun Watson if he thinks he can win more games at the expense of seeing what he has in a younger quarterback like Shedeur Sanders or a potential draft pick?
Well, I think Todd Monken and everybody else in that building is going to want to get to winning as quickly as they possibly can. I don't think the team, the roster, the staff, the city, I don't think anybody has a whole lot of more tolerance for a bunch of losing. So, I mean, you'll just lose your locker room way too early if you do that. We already heard Myles Garrett say at the end of last year, I don't have more rebuilding in me. I need to be out there winning. And so that's what they've got to do. They've got to get to winning as quickly as possible. But it doesn't mean that they can't do that with Shedeur Sanders. Because even though he does require development, if you have a defense that is as good as the Cleveland Browns defense, and you add a bunch to the offensive pile, then maybe you can get to winning with Shedeur Sanders sooner than later. They don't have the toughest schedule in the NFL next year. At least it doesn't seem like they do. At this point, it's always kind of hard to tell this far out, but they possibly can win games with Shedeur Sanders if he has a whole offseason where he's getting those reps, if he has an upgraded supporting cast, if he has a better offensive line, some more skill players, if you've got Quinshawn coming back healthy from his ankle injury and his surgery. Who knows? Maybe Todd Monken will look at this and say, Shedeur gives us the best chance to win. We don't know yet. We don't know. We don't even know if Todd Monken's going to look at those two guys, Shador and Deshaun, and decide if he wants to go out and acquire a Malik Willis or some other quarterback. So we don't know the answer to that yet, but I don't think it's really necessarily a case of either developing a young guy and not being able to win with him for a while, or having a veteran and thinking you can win with him quicker than you can with Shador. I think it's let the best man win.
Yeah, and I think, you know, if Shador can't win that job, like you sh- you shouldn't give it to him anyway, right? Your goal shouldn't like you have to play the best guy. And so it shouldn't just be, well, we need to develop this guy, so throw him out there. And I also think it's so hard to talk about this quarterback situation because we just don't who knows what that room's going to look like in a month and a half even. And that's even before the draft. But nobody thought Kenny Pickett was going to be in that quarterback room last year. And then the very first move they make is trade for Kenny Pickett. So they could do something weird. I keep throwing this out there, but God, the guy just won Senior Bowl MVP, Garrett Nussmeier. Like, could they find someone who was like that, whether it's him or one of these other guys who was supposed to be at this top of this super strong draft, but fell off for one reason or another? Does that guy end up in the room, and do they fall in love with that guy? Like, I don't know. We just don't know what this quarterback room is going to look like. But you're right; they've got to play the best guy. They're not doing anybody any favors by just throwing a Shador Sanders out there, or throwing a third round, a new third round pick out there, or throwing out Dylan Gabriel, whatever, or even Deshaun Watson if they don't believe that they can win with that guy.
Right, 100%. I mean, the key is, and the question is, what does Deshaun have left? And we don't know the answer to that yet. They're going to have to get him out there, and they're going to have to take a look and see what they have. And then where does he stack up against Shador? And if he is better than Shador, then they'll start Deshaun. So I think that Todd Monken really just has to be very honest with himself, which I'm sure he will be because that's the kind of person that he is. He can't be influenced by all of these other things that are going to be going on around him. As we can already see, Shador Sanders moves the needle, right? It's a major reason why he was added to the Pro Bowl list because he's bringing eyes and attention to the Pro Bowl games at a time when a lot of the other quarterbacks, the top quarterbacks, especially in the AFC, couldn't make it. They couldn't be in it. They're injured or whatever the case may be. So, he's content and he's marketing and he's branding in addition to everything else. I mean, supposedly he's already filmed a commercial if the Browns are playing in Paris in October, which could be happening because that report is out there. So, we know that he is good for all that kind of stuff, but I don't see Todd Monken falling into that trap. I think he will evaluate him on his own merits. And if he is the best quarterback, and he might be, if he is the best quarterback to win games for the Cleveland Browns, then that's who he will start.
I am not surprised, by the way, by the Paris commercial thing, because I've said this before on the pod. He had a Nike ad after the preseason game. So, like, obviously, he could potentially be filming this commercial for the Browns playing in Paris. Which, if people aren't caught up on this, there have been reports, or there had been reports over the weekend, that the Browns and Saints would play in Paris on, is it October 25th? Was that the date? And then the
Yes.
NFL officially announced the Saints would be the host team for a game in Paris, but not who their opponent was. But Mary Kay, it looks like you might be on your way to Paris next year.
Yes.
Or
And
this year. This year actually, I guess. It is
yes,
2026 already.
yes. And there are absolutely 100% worse places that you could go to play a football game.
And you've done the London thing before. Like, come on, you didn't need London again.
Right. And now I have been to Paris and I absolutely love Paris. Love Paris. It is an absolutely gorgeous, magical, and amazing city. And so I would have no qualms whatsoever about going back to Paris. And then I saw another thing. where when they announced the Madrid game, I don't know if you saw this or not, but it looked like a Browns helmet. It looked like a Browns helmet. So I'm like,
I didn't see that image, but no. Okay, well that's interesting too. Maybe they'll just play a bunch of games overseas.
yeah, so maybe we go to Paris and then on to Madrid the week after that, just stay over there. So
Well, that's
we'll
what the
see how that
Vikings
goes.
did, and I know the Jags are different, but the Jags have played back-to-back games overseas before, so who knows? Maybe that's what they're thinking.
Yes, it's been happening that teams have been doing that, staying over there for a couple of weeks. So is this the year for the Cleveland Browns to have back to back international games? My goodness, that would be really, really bizarre, but it could happen. It really seems like the Paris thing is happening because the site that reported it, RMC Sports, was very definitive about the fact that it was the Saints versus the Cleveland Browns. They had sources telling them that, and no one will confirm it yet. But they also reported that Shador was over there filming a commercial for it, and I have had it confirmed myself that he was in Paris last week. That he just so happened to be there last week. And you can see when he walks into Todd Monken's office on Friday, Andrew Berry says to him, uh, welcome back to the States. Welcome back to the States. So there's
It's all
something
coming
going on
together.
here. I
Yeah,
think
I know I saw him post some Instagram posts. It was him or somebody in the well-off crew when he was at a soccer game. I don't know
yes.
where that was, but that was like right after the season or shortly after the season, but I wonder if that was all just one big European trip.
Yeah. Or he could have been right at the stadium where this game is going to be. It holds 80,000 people. It's the largest stadium in the country. And it just seems to me like this is happening. This is happening. They're not ready to announce it. They're not ready to talk about it yet, but it seems like Cleveland Browns are headed to Paris in October. And Dan, I try hard to get you on these trips, but
You do. It's probably not going to happen, but we'll see. Look, we'll see. We'll just see what
we'll see.
happens.
You never know.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We're gonna ask this one. It is wild. It is not a question Browns fans want to hear, but it's a scenario that's interesting. It comes from Greg in Cherry Valley, California. Hey, Mary Kay, this is probably premature, and there's no probably about it. It is. But what if Deshaun Watson surprises everyone, reverts to his Pro Bowl form, and the Browns win 10 games? Could we be talking Deshaun Watson extension at that point?
Yes. Yes, they probably would be talking Deshaun Watson extension if he's playing at a Pro Bowl level and wins 10 games for them. I mean, wouldn't you uh, like to have Sam Darnold if you were the Minnesota Vikings right now? So you don't let a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback walk out the door if he's playing at that level. And we all remember that that Andrew Berry talked about Deshaun Watson in terms of being here for a decade, for making it to a second contract with the Cleveland Browns and being here for a very long time. Now, we are getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but in the event that he were able to get back to that kind of level, absolutely, I think they would extend him. And here's the other thing about that. If Deshaun Watson is healthy, my money is on Todd Monken to get him back to a Pro Bowl level if he's healthy. There's a lot that has to be done, a lot of obstacles. It's been a long, long time. There's a lot of water under that bridge. But I think if anybody can pull that out of him, it's Todd Monken.
Well, and here we know this, like these coaches can't help themselves. And so no matter what, if they're sitting out there in the spring and they're watching in training camp and Deshaun looks a little bit like Deshaun Watson, and maybe Shador is struggling. Now, Shador is really good he was really good in camp last year. Shador is a very good, I'm not saying this is an insult, I promise, but Shador is a very good practice player, right? Like he looks good in practice. And that's part of what makes him so intriguing. And some of that does translate to the games. Deshaun can be a very good practice player too. And we've seen it. Like I remember when they first got him and we showed up to OTAs and it was like, oh yeah, it does look different when the ball comes out of his hand and he spins it. I think we did a whole podcast on that even. So, you start to, as a coach, you start to think about what it could look like if you're Todd Monken. Of course, you think you can harness all of this athleticism and all of this ability that Deshaun has and revive it. I mean, that's you don't get one of these jobs if you don't believe you can do that. So that's where it gets really interesting. And then, like I said, it depends what the rest of this room looks like. But if we are talking Deshaun and Shador as the top two guys, I could see a world where Deshaun looks good enough that they would give him that opportunity.
Right. And we have seen Todd Monken, and we've heard Todd Monken talk about his philosophy on quarterbacks as we're watching him speak in some of these clips over the past few days. And one of the things that he has been very adamant about is the fact that there's so much to be said for the dual threat quarterback. And he is coming off of 3 seasons with Lamar Jackson. He knows how much that kind of a quarterback can really hurt you. Now, the thing about Deshaun is he's coming off of 2 Achilles surgeries. So is he going to have the same agility and mobility? Hard to say, but that's something that he works on so hard. I mean, we see him just sometimes after practice doing nothing but working on his footwork and his agility. I know you've seen it. I've seen it. Uh, Even, after a long, hot training camp practice, he'll stand out there and just work on his footwork for 45 minutes or whatever. So he's very meticulous about that, and he cares a lot about being able to be that dual threat quarterback. So if he still has that in him, then that's going to be very, very attractive to Todd Monken. We also saw that Sanders can make those off schedule plays, that he can use his legs, that he can extend those plays. That's one of the areas in which he far exceeded my expectations because scouts and coaches had told me that's not how they necessarily viewed him as an NFL quarterback, as being that mobile and that off schedule. That supposedly he was more of a kind of a drop back passer type, or that he would be that in the pros. That didn't turn out to be the case. And I think that Todd Monken will be very, very impressed with Shador's ability to be a playmaker. He's a very instinctive player. He's got a point guard mentality out there, and he definitely uses his legs to his advantage.
It it's gonna be like, it's gonna be weird. Like, it'll be a if again, if it comes down to if this quarterback battle is Shador versus Deshaun Watson, it's gonna be weird, but it's also really kind of interesting too to see what direction this goes. And I do think the spending the last 3 years with Lamar Jackson makes it even more interesting because I think they're different types of runners and they play the position differently, but still, Deshaun Watson is really good when he gets out in space. And, of course, I think he's always been a good passer. I think he was probably a better passer than Lamar when they first both came into the league. So I don't know. I don't know if it's the quarterback battle everybody wants to watch, but it would be a very interesting quarterback battle, I think.
It really would be. And again, the thing to remember is I'm sure that Todd Monken, because he spent so much time in the college ranks too, that he's got an appreciation for, and I haven't looked back to see where all the years matched up. But perhaps he coached against, I'd have to really look this up. I don't know. But maybe he coached against Deshaun Watson in college. And I'm sure he coached against him in the pros. He knows what he can do. I know he coached against him in the pros. Um, and he was on the opposite sideline in that 2023 game when Deshaun Watson just came out with that steely look in his eyes and that resolve. And on the road with a bum ankle and a fractured shoulder, he came out of that locker room and he went 14 for 14. And he helped beat the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore, coming from behind, coming from down 14 points in the fourth quarter. And he beat that football team on their turf. And that is a hard thing to do. That is a very hard thing to do. So Todd has seen what he's capable of. And I think that if Deshaun is healthy, that he's going to give someone a run for their money in this competition.
And yeah, Andrew does not give up on people very quickly.
Right.
And he has said it. The plan is for Deshaun Watson to be on this roster. And so if you're going to have a guy that expensive eating up that much cap space, even if they end up renegotiating that deal again, if you're going to have that guy on your roster and that much money on your roster, you might as well try and get something out of it. That doesn't mean he has to be the starter. We're past that point, but you might as well see what he's got and at least let him compete for the job and see what happens from there.
And the other thing to consider about that is the fact that Jimmy Haslam, we know that he uttered the quote that went viral last year that it was a big swing and a miss. He's the one that put his money where his mouth was, and he gave Deshaun Watson a $230 million fully guaranteed contract, the very first fully guaranteed contract in the history of the NFL. Who would love Deshaun Watson to go out and succeed more than Jimmy Haslam? Is there anybody on the face of the earth that would like to see that happen more than Jimmy Haslam so that he can stop being bashed incessantly for making what everybody calls the worst trade in the history of the NFL?
Yeah, I think there's a few people in that building that would love to see that happen. And again, with the state of this quarterback room and some of the options out there, it's still super early, so who knows? Um, that might be what we're talking about come September. So it's it's never boring with the Cleveland Browns. I bet you didn't think, Mary Kay, that on February 2nd we'd be talking Deshaun Watson contract extension.
No, I didn't see that coming, but look, uh, anything can happen when you're talking about the Browns, their quarterback situation. It has been a wild, wild ride at the QB position for many, many, many years. It would be tough to shock me anymore when it comes to the Browns and quarterbacks.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, it's what we were saying with Deshaun all last year, right? Even if there's just a tiny 0.001% chance he could play, just don't ever rule it out. So we'll see. That'll do it for this edition of the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Those questions came from our Football Insider subscribers, cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner at the top of the page to get involved with that. We're on Instagram, Orange and Brown Talk, Twitter's Orange Brown Talk. And of course, make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel, Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. Mary Kay, I'll talk to you later.
Sounds great.